Hi everyone, I'm Jordan Powers, as you probably know by following the YouTube channel. This is my buddy Wes Otto, and today we're going to talk a little bit about selling virtual tours. And the reason I brought Wes on is because I am not really much of a salesperson to speak of. The minute I start talking about numbers and money, I get nervous and I choke and I end up giving them, I just give away the farm. Whereas Wes is a little more collected, a little more silent. He listens, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So some of you that are in the Virtual Tour Profit Facebook group may have noticed a post that I made a few days ago about selling a virtual tour to a college campus, to a local community college who actually has 2 college campuses. And and I don't even remember if they initially approached us or if we reached out to them. Do you remember you reached out to them?
Yep.
Okay. So Wes is not like a technical creative, like he doesn't do the photography and stuff, but he does sell. And I'll let you introduce yourself in a second here, but I wanted to bring him on to talk a little bit about how he sold the virtual tour and what that whole process kind of looked like, what the conversations looked like, some of the headaches we ran into, just to kind of give you guys an idea as to, I don't know, how we did it. I also want to add before we go, this was the first official commercial shoot that we did for anything that wasn't real estate related, and it was very profitable. So anyway, yeah, let's start with you. Like, so you knew that I was doing these virtual tours, you knew I had technology, and
Yep.
I don't remember if I approached you at some point. I don't remember how it all came to be.
Yeah, so Jordan had just briefly mentioned to me one day that he was working on this tour piece of his business, maybe launching it as a separate line within his business, and talking about specifically businesses that might make sense given the whole COVID situation. And I just remember kind of tucking that away in the back of my head, but not really having a sure idea of how to use that information. And then I was watching a news story that Channel 5 in our state of Minnesota was running on college campuses specifically, using virtual tour options to sell their campuses and their education and curriculum to prospective students, since college campuses have been largely shut down. And so I saw that story, and without even really talking to Jordan, I sent an email right away to a president of a local college that I happen to be connected to, and just said, hey, this is something that we're getting into. I think based on the current situation, this might make sense for you guys. Let me know if you're interested. And I actually never heard back from the president of that college, but Jordan and I talked a little bit in the meantime, kind of got a better idea of what it would look like. And then somewhere down the line, someone else from within the campus reached out to us and said that email had been forwarded on. And so that was really how the conversation started from a sales standpoint. I'm not necessarily a traditional salesperson in the fact that I don't do cold calls. I'm not out there reaching out to random people.
Right.
So this was a unique situation where there was definitely a need, and we knew that college had this specific need, and we had this new service that was coming online. And so I just took the initiative in this specific case, and it worked out serendipitously where it just made sense for both sides.
Yeah, so I think one day you contacted me saying, hey, would you be interested in doing a virtual tour for so-and-so? And we kind of talked about logistics and everything. We set up a meeting with them. Well, I think before we even set up a meeting, we talked about what was possible, like you said. And just for all of you who are more familiar with the virtual tour world, so I basically proposed that we could offer them 3 different options. I was thinking Matterport, Cloud Pano, and maybe a more custom version like using 3D Vista. Something that we could build more of a web experience, just customized to their brand. And we were thinking about how that would look and the level of work. Obviously, Matterport would be the least amount of work because you just show up and shoot and you're done with it. Cloud Pano is the best of both worlds because it's customizable, but it's not a significant amount of work, whereas 3D Vista is a lot of work, and it's basically building an entire web experience. And ideally, if we get away with not doing that, that'd be great. So Cloud Pano was definitely the way we were looking, and I think we just kind of put together some numbers based on that. And off the top of my head, I don't remember them, but I think, we probably even came up with the numbers after we met with them, I think.
Yeah, well, we definitely had to do a fair amount of research into what was going to be required, because we hadn't even thought about the fact that they had 2 separate campuses. And so that was a part of the process when we were thinking about cost, how much time was going to be involved.
Yeah. So I guess fast forward, we ended up having a meeting with one of the marketing people there They came to the office. We sat down, asked them what the need was. And really, the need was that they needed to, being with COVID happening and everything, they needed to have a virtual experience. And we just happened to be toward the end of their fiscal year. So they had a budget that they had to spend. And we definitely leveraged that, I would think. And they were as well. They were like, just give us some options and we'll see how we can make it work. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So when we had the meeting, we pitched them the 3 different ideas, and I actually went to that campus that day. Actually, we both did. We went to the campus that day, and I did, I think, like 10 shots just to show them a demo of what a Cloud Pano virtual tour would look like. They also had a link to some Matterport tours to get an idea as to what that experience was like, and they also had some links to a 3D Vista type custom tour. So they were very familiar with, they had the opportunity to become very familiar with what all of the options were, but they kind of stuck with the demo because they were sold on the Cloud Pano demo as soon as we sent it. So kind of knowing what would be involved with that, I think we pictured like 100 images at one campus and like 75 images at the other campus. And I think I don't know that we charged based on, I don't remember the pricing structure, because you more came up with the pricing if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we kind of went back and forth on that, and I just remember that it would have been difficult to do it per image because we didn't even know the exact number of images, so how do you give them a final price tag when it might fluctuate a little bit based on what the day actually requires? And so we just kind of came up with a loose range or an estimate and figured that if it was underneath that, great from a profitability standpoint. Maybe there's even an opportunity to give a discount. If it was over that, because it was the first project, we might be okay with doing a little bit of extra work. So
I think, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I know the Matterport tour was the lower end, and I think we were aiming somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 for that. And then the Cloud Pano was anywhere from like 6,000 to 10,000, and then the 3D Vista was like anywhere from 10,000 to 15,000 plus.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken.
That's roughly right.
Yeah, and then if there was also the opportunity. So we also wanted to build hosting into this. So hosting, maintenance, however you want to look at it. We build it as hosting and maintenance. That means that we would host it, and over the course of the next 2 years, I think, we would put any updates to it, or make any updates that were necessary. If I needed to go back and retake some of the photos, that's fine. Because the monthly maintenance fee we ended up pitching for the Cloud Pano version was $250 a month, which more than covers any maintenance that I would need to do, swapping out photos, running over there and running back. It's not a significant amount of time to do all that. And also the hosting. So I purchased the Cloud Pano Lifetime subscription, so there's not really a cost anymore on my end, a recurring cost. But there's also the option to download your Cloud Pano files and host them on your own server, which is another reason I wanted to use the Cloud Pano route, because they could take those files and put them on their own server if they wanted to, which is what they ended up doing. Okay, so I'm trying to think of what else.
Well, just from a sales process, I'll jump in. It was interesting. We were okay with either one of 360 Vista or Cloud Pano, and between the two of them, we weren't sure which one they were going to go with. But right off the bat, as soon as they saw the first demo that we had put together, they really fell in love with that software, which was interesting because we didn't know that they were going to be so settled one way or the other. But
yeah, we even tried. We were thinking, well, if they're sold on Cloud Pano, then let's maybe just try to, and no offense against Cloud Pano, but let's try to see if they'd be interested in doing the more customized experience. And we pitched it pretty hard. We were like, let's think 2-3 years down the road. You're going to want to be able to do these, this and that, and they're like, no, this is, and they stuck with it.
Yep.
And
multiple decision makers too. It wasn't just the one marketing contact. There was at least 3 different people that were involved in the decision making process.
Yeah. So when I posted about this, I think there were a couple comments that were made about, like, 1, the quality of image, and 2, the price that we ended up charging. Like, I think some people felt that maybe that was a lot, and especially charging $250 a month for monthly hosting. Now, you're in a unique position because you're not a photographer. Mm-hmm. You're a marketer. You're a business person. You're a consultant. And you're a salesperson. So can you just talk to some of those from your perspective, where you're sitting, like image quality? Let's talk about that a little bit. Like from a layperson's perspective, from just a business person, like talk about image quality, like how you see it. If that's pretty general, but I just kind of like,
Sure. Yeah. I think about it from a utility standpoint, right? I mean, it's the end customer's perspective that's going to end up mattering to the college, but to us, the only thing that matters is the college or the client's perspective. And I think that really what they wanted was something that was easy to navigate from a platform standpoint, and they trusted in your ability as a photographer to be able to get the right quality of image.
Right. Well, I guess the argument could be made is like I could have made better quality images. So like instead of charging them $8,000 or whatever or whatever it was for using the camera that I did use, which is the Ricoh Theta Z1, I could have used like a DSLR and got a higher quality image. But that would have doubled, tripled, or quadrupled the amount of work. So I guess from that perspective, like when you look at it, Are you like pixel peeping and like noticing that difference in quality?
No, and I think that the other interesting thing is that the marketing individual that we worked with came from a photography background, and so
that's right, I forgot about that.
They would have known, based on the type of camera that we brought to the shoot, oh, this isn't DSLR. So, from that standpoint, they probably understood the difference, but yet they also didn't understand the technology piece. And so they might not have known what was possible from an image stitching standpoint, what the cost of that was going to be. And quite frankly, as a layperson that's not in that particular field, I don't know until Jordan tells me. So
right. So we didn't plan this out. I threw this at him, so he didn't know I was asking these questions. So like the argument about image quality, I think it's relative. When you're a photographer and your job is to pay attention to quality of images, you're going to notice the difference between a Z1 and a DSLR image. But in all honesty, it really depends on the monitor you're viewing it on. A lot of them are going to be viewed on mobile devices. You're not going to really tell all that much of a difference, except for when it comes to like dynamic range, so like seeing window detail and whatnot.
Well, and I think that's another good point too. And this is by no means discredit to the particular college that we were working with, but you've got to keep in mind too, the client is a Midwestern community college. And so from that perspective, the facility itself, they were trying to give more of a perspective to the students of what is there, not necessarily a demonstration of, the fine architectural details. It wasn't necessarily that was their focus as much as it was just a better feeling of here's what you're walking into from a community standpoint.
Yeah, it's literally doing a virtual tour, because a big part of the conversation was we can't bring people to the campus to do virtual tours, so let's recreate that with this technology. Now, from a sales perspective, this is gonna, like, for me, this would be the most interesting part of the conversation. So I've seen you in presentations and sales meetings, and you are very stoic about it. You are kind of, like, even the way you're sitting here now, like, this is your sales like mode. Like, you can sit there calmly and you can throw numbers out there comfortably. Like, so I guess like. Let's start here. Let's talk about value. So how was there any discomfort in saying $8,000 or whatever it was?
No, and here's the reason why. I've worked with colleges specifically in the past on other projects, nothing like this, but I understand that their budgets range in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, depending on what subject matter you're talking about. So obviously you want to be budget friendly. You want to make sure that there's the appropriate value for the price tag that you're asking for. But ultimately, a few hundred or even a couple thousand is not necessarily a big swing for someone or something of that size when it comes to that institution.
Especially when a lot of their marketing budget is not being spent anymore because they're not, they can't bring students to the campus. Right. So like there's a lot of money that's going to be shifted toward other things.
Well, and in this particular case, if you look at it directly from an ROI standpoint, which is what I do as a consultant or as a
return on investment, for those of you guys who don't know.
Good clarification.
ROI.
Yeah. When you look at it from that standpoint, you're talking about a college student, and we all know how much tuition can be. And without getting into the figures of what this particular institution charges for tuition, if you think about an $8,000, even a $20,000 tour, a lot of times that's not even the full value or the full cost of what one student costs to go there for a full 4 years.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it from that perspective, if this tour lands one student a year, but it only costs that much to get it done the first time, that's ROI positive.
So a lot of it is really knowing the audience that you're pitching to. Like you can go into that comfortably saying, well, I know generally speaking colleges, at least in the Midwest, have, you know a few figures. You know that like a student's going to pay this much in tuition, and that's a technical college. They're not going to be paying like, a university cost or anything like that. Like a university is a whole different story.
Right.
They've got a different budget, a higher budget. They would probably lean more towards like a more customized, 3D Vista type thing. Whereas with this, even outside of colleges, I mean, like small businesses, even like you're very familiar with the restaurant industry, so
right.
like, just talk about maybe one or two other types of industries that virtual tours, because you and I have talked a lot about different businesses we could pitch this to.
Yep.
Like, what's maybe one or two you've had in mind that you could pitch, and
Sure.
what approach you might take, just in a nutshell?
Yeah, I would think that experience-based businesses, especially right now, would be a big one. I mean, I think when I think about local casinos, let's say in the Minnesota area, that make a lot of sense. For us, from a sales standpoint, I think about if I was a customer and I was interested in going to those casinos, but there's now COVID procedures in place, what is that experience going to be like? If I'm someone that has anxiety, which I don't, thank God, but if I did, I'd probably be really nervous about walking into a large space that would technically be considered a hotbed for this particular type of virus. So would a virtual tour help me kind of alleviate some of that anxiety, because I'd know what to expect going into it? And so those types of experience-based businesses, it makes a lot of sense for. It can also make sense for the smaller businesses when we're thinking about restaurants and those types of folks, but you've got to understand restaurants work on a very fine margin. And especially in situations like this right now, there's probably not a ton of room within their budget for this type of an expense. So you just have to know your audience from a sales standpoint and say, is this going to make sense for them, not only right now, but in the long term, and do they have the budget to be able to make it actually a reality?
Yeah, so one of the things that we considered when we were figuring out what pricing might look like is maybe having a lower cost to entry, like, in the $200 to $500, $600, $700 range, depending on what they wanted, and then, but making sure that we sold them on the monthly hosting. So talk a little bit about, because again, I'm not comfortable pitching, like selling things. Like when it comes to numbers, I choke. Like talk about like justifying, like mentally, psychologically, why you should feel okay with charging hosting, and just I guess how to think about that when they're in a process.
Sure.
Like, so
well, now monthly recurring revenue becomes a little bit easier, especially when it becomes bigger institutions, because the budget's going to absorb it, but also for just all of us, right? Because we're all paying monthly for Netflix, or we're paying for Hulu, or whatever the other monthly subscriptions are. So it's a little bit more commonplace to think about things from a hosting or from a monthly standpoint, charging that. But I think the bigger case for what we charge from a hosting standpoint would be the ease of use and the convenience behind the fact that anytime that you need something updated or changed, we're there. And so when you're talking about a resource-strapped organization, that's a really great opportunity to say, hey, you don't want to have to worry about this, and you don't want to have to hire someone from outside of this area to travel down and pay a premium for them to do it on a moment's notice to photograph or update something that you need done today. And that's something that we can offer because we're right there in their backyard.
Yeah. So I mean, like $250 a month. I mean, that makes me nervous. Like I wouldn't be able to sell that. Like how did you? I guess I mean you explained it a little bit just now, but I kind of want to dig a little bit more on that. Like there's some people that I know are just charging like $10 a month or $20 a month or like a smaller number like that. Is $250 excessive? Was that just a good sale, or I mean, like, can you justify that? Like, again, I know you talked about it a little bit, but I just want to talk about like that specific number.
Yeah. Well, we did a good amount. I would say for us, we did a good amount of research into what we knew about other target customers that were of a similar nature that might be paying for hosting. And I had conversations with another admissions director locally that...
Yeah, talk a little bit about the details of what they...
Yeah. So I reached out to an admissions director that actually recruited me to go to college and just said, hey, we're looking at getting into this space. Could you give me a little bit more insight into what that process was like for you guys? And also, by the way, are you interested in maybe hiring us to do some services too? And so we're on their short list, so fingers crossed. But the cool thing was he was very forthcoming with me because we had kind of developed a friendship, and he just told me about their general pricing scheme and what they had paid to have their tour done. So now we have a good baseline pricing from someone that's out of the city, so it's a ways away from us, but at the same time considered our backyard from a service area. And we can compare that to the actual product that we're seeing. And so that was a good part of how we priced our services, with perhaps a little bit of a discount because we were new to the game.
Right. And I don't remember what it was, but I mean, it was in the thousands that they're paying each year for, it might have even been the tens of thousands. Am I wrong?
The initial purchase price, I think, was over 20,000 for that particular institution. This might be too much information.
That's fine. Yeah.
But anyways, the purchase price was definitely quite a bit more than what we actually put out for our pricing for our particular college. The hosting pricing was a little bit grayer as far as the information that I got from the administrator. So we weren't 100% solid on that, but we could kind of guess based on what they were charging for this, that their hosting fees were probably significantly more than what we were.
That, and there was a lot of limitations on what they would do with those. Like there was like one, once a year. Actually, it was I think once a year.
It was once a year that they would come down, and they would have to pay for travel and the shoot itself.
Yeah.
So they were paying for hosting on top of actually paying for the shoot. So instead of separating that out and saying, well, now you're going to pay this much to host it, but you're also going to pay for every time we do a shoot, we just bundled it together and gave them that extra peace of mind and convenience, and saying, hey, your particular college is currently under development. You're doing these different construction projects. Instead of having to wait a full year just because you missed the calendar date that we have set in our contract, let's just make this a regular thing, and let's look at, hey, anytime you need something, you give us a call and we're there.
Yeah. I'm just going to check really quick to see if there were...
By the way, Jordan is underselling himself. He was a part of the sales process. So even though he says he's not a salesperson, and yes, I did take a bit of the lead in the process, he was definitely a salesman of sorts in that case too, because he understands the industry.
Well, but here's the difference. Like their sales, okay, it's a good teamwork type of thing. Like I can sell something that I believe in, and it's usually just from an emotional thing. Like I can get somebody excited about something if I'm excited about it. Like my body language changes, my energy changes, my eyes get all wide. Like I try to put a little bit of a vision in their head. I try to just really sell them on the vision of it. And the minute they start asking about pricing, I'm like, oh well, I choke. I just choke. I can't do it. That's why on my real estate photography business, I have it all online, so I don't have to talk about money. But again, like I've said this a million times, like you're comfortable talking about that.
Well, I think a good example, and I just thought of this on the spot, so let's see how bad I screw this analogy up, but think about it kind of like from a used car standpoint, right? So if you're looking at a used car, you're probably going to be finding different reasons for why you should not pay the price that they have on it from a sticker standpoint, right?
Yeah.
There's rust, the tires need to be changed pretty soon, I don't know what kind of maintenance there's going to be. You're finding those types of things. So when Jordan talks about me maybe being silent or quiet, it's a lot of times because I'm listening and I'm thinking of extra questions that I want to ask that person to get a better understanding of what are their needs, what are their uses for this product, what is the value in this for them, how do they see this service, Because the better understanding I have of that, kind of the reverse of trying to negotiate down a car, I can negotiate up what my eventual value is in this that I can charge for.
Okay, so just we're going to kind of wrap this thing up. And I keep on looking up because there's a monitor up there and I see us moving and it's like seeing a squirrel. But anyway, just to wrap this up, like what's, you've given a lot of information, but like what's one or two things that like you can just instill like confidence-wise, like not necessarily giving them a script, just like two things you can, because like there's a lot of people who are watching this who are trying to figure out this virtual tour thing, including me. Like I'm still trying to figure it out. But just the selling process in general, like, I think listening to your point is like super important. You mentioned like having a little bit of research done ahead of time so you know what kind of budget they might be working with, or at least just thinking creatively, like, okay, what is this worth to them? How much does a student cost each year? I don't know, just like what's one or two little things you can think of that you would just leave people with?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, be very open and honest and transparent in the process. I think the first thing that I said when I had a back and forth email with the contact that we had is, hey, we're new to this. Like, I know that you're probably at some stage of this conversation going to ask for a portfolio of virtual tours. I have a couple of examples that Jordan's put together, but I don't have like a massive portfolio. I don't have other colleges or universities, so don't expect for us to necessarily have this figured out yet. We're learning this alongside. We know how to do the photography. Jordan knew how to do all of the technical aspect, but we just hadn't gone through this from a business process standpoint. So we were very honest on that. The second thing we did was we really fell back on the couple of things that we know we were good at. So Jordan is a very quality photographer. We had no doubt that we could pull it off from a quality and a technical, standpoint. And we also knew as an agency on my end that we're a community business, and community is one of the main focuses within our mission of our organization. And so working with an organization that was in our backyard, it just became easy for them to say, okay, we're going to trust you because we're probably going to see you down the line. We've already done other projects within our overall state system with you. So there's a level of trust there that was easy to build on because they were in our own backyard. We were being honest and transparent up front, and we had the expertise to be able to pull it off even if we hadn't done it before.
Yeah, and a lot of what you're saying, like in between the lines, is like being well connected with the community, like joining a chamber, doing some kind of networking organization would be beneficial. You happen to be heavily involved in the local chamber here, as well as, your business is, you're an agency, so there's, you have different types of businesses in the industry. You're just well connected in the community, so that's going to really be beneficial, being well connected with the community, knowing what businesses are out there, always being honest and transparent, because the minute you slip up and you break that trust, like, I don't know, like I've watched your guys' business grow from, in the last, 4 years now?
Yep.
Has it been 4 years?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
crazy.
4 years now, like from, they were just in a little janky office in the back of something. I don't know. Was it a law office?
It was an old Victorian home turned into a law office.
Right.
It had some cool aspects, but it definitely had some outdated aspects.
But I'm just saying, I've watched you guys grow slowly, and the approach you've always taken is just being very honest with people. Mm-hmm. I've seen you politely but very firmly say no. Mm-hmm. Like when people try to push you around, like you have a very strong presence. But again, there's so many different things you can do when it comes to the sales process. It's not just pitching a number. Now, the one tip that I'll give you is that if you're like me and you're not really that comfortable with selling, when you start choking around numbers, find somebody who is good at selling and is honest and is ideally well connected. That's always a benefit. Like maybe a realtor, or maybe, just somebody who has selling experience. And you can work out an agreement with them. Like, I'm not going to share our agreement, but essentially it's like any other agency agreement. Usually when you work with an agent of some sort, they'll take a percentage of the total sale and you do all the work. Essentially you just, that's kind of how it works. So it's wise to do that, especially if they can get a much larger payday than you could. It's also nice because they're not coming at it from a photographer's perspective. They're coming at it from like a business to business perspective. So you can look at it almost objectively, and pitch the service of somebody else. Yep. So it's not as self-serving, I guess. So it kind of works to your advantage.
Well, and I'd say take the expertise of the person that's in the position that understands the end goal of the customer and is in that sales position, but also don't be afraid to assert from a value standpoint. I think Jordan's taught me so much about the photography industry, so it's a good give and take. Make sure that you're on a level where you respect each other and one isn't dominating the other.
Right. So that's really it for now, you guys. This was kind of an on the whim thing. Wes was listening to a podcast and I grabbed him and he said yeah. So we're just talking about this. Again, I see a lot of posts about how do you do this, how do you do that, and it's usually business related. And I just thought this would be valuable just to have you listen in on this conversation. If you want to check out Cloud Pano, check out use the link in the description. If you found value in this video, and again, let us know if you have any questions. Did you want to pitch your?
Yeah,
okay. This is Wes. He's not going to share all of his information because he's not really in this industry. He's mine. You guys,
yours?
yeah, you can't use him. But you can ask questions in the comments. So if you have any questions about this and if they're sales related, I can always forward it on to Wes and he can chime in. But otherwise, yeah, you guys, thanks so much for watching. I know this was a little long. This was quite long. So if you have any questions, let me know. But again, thanks for watching.